Hello and welcome back, everyone. It's just another day in the life as a military wife, and I am back from my family time little break that I had, and it honestly feels like I've stepped into the twilight zone. As a result of the staggering events that have occurred in the last few weeks, I have made the decision to reorganize the order of some of the episodes I was planning on doing and moved some things up, pushed some things back. You'll see what I'm getting at. Anyway, several months ago, I encountered a fabulous book, and I really want to share that with you all today. I think it would help with some of the things we are facing in the world. So, as always, I am your host, Sam Wolf, and you're listening to Life of a Military Wife. So, what is this book that I want to share with you? Well, it's called The Soul of Civility, and it was written by Alexandria Hudson. And it hit a chord with me. I have for years been looking for a resource that would help me better contextualize my feelings about civility. It started years and years ago, but I started to notice the tendency in our culture to focus more on virtue signaling or looking good opposed to being good, actually doing good things, genuinely being involved and caring, and really not caring what people thought of how we were. Um, and it was hard to contextualize. And then the fact that as we have moved more and more into this modern digital communication age, it seems like people are more comfortable saying things online to or about individuals that they would have never said to or about them in person previously. And then that has escalated to the point where now it's coming back full circle and people are saying things and acting in ways that they would have never have in past. And to me, it just felt like civility and society was just struggling. And yeah, I was getting a little discouraged, and I was listening to another podcast. And one thing I love about this podcast is they will constantly have authors on talking about different books. Some of the books I'm interested in, some I'm not interested in. But Alexandra was on there and she was talking about her book, The Soul of Civility. And it struck a chord with me. And I just knew it was a book I had to get my hands on and I had to read. And because life is absolutely nuts with 4 kids and a dog and a life and, militariness, I started off doing it, reading it or going through it with an audiobook while I was working on other stuff. And very clearly, this became a book that I wanted to have a physical copy of. And so I'm going to tell you this straight up. Listen to the audiobook if you want. It's fabulous. But I would highly, 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 highly recommend getting a physical copy because she's got things in there that you're just going to want to go back and re-reference. Or at least I did. And it's so much easier to do that with a physical copy of a book. If you want to do a Kindle version or whatever, that's your deal. I don't like Kindle. No offense to Kindle, it's not my median. I just don't like staring at a screen for that long. If I'm going to be reading a book, I want to hold the book. I'm old school, but that's a whole nother tangent. Let's get back to where I wanted to go. In it, she talks a lot about Martin Luther King and some of his letters, and she goes through different points of history and times where people have felt that there was a lack of civility. This isn't new. This isn't the first time a culture has encountered this, which to me is comforting because I know that if other people have confronted this sort of cultural dissonance in the past, there must be a solution and we can regain that cultural continuity or cohesiveness that we have lost. And in it, she talks about the difference between civility and politeness. And to me, that was huge because I kind of instinctually had a feeling for what she explained, but I would have never been able to break it down the way she did. I just wasn't able to contextualize or solidify the concept as easily as she has. And in it, she talks about civility is a disposition, a way of seeing others as being endowed with dignity and inherent value. Politeness, by contrast, is a technique. It is a doctrine or manners or etiquette. It's a polish. And so often we have politeness or politically correctness or virtue signaling, which in and of themselves are not inherently bad, but they're not inherently good either. And they can be misused to be harmful or hurtful. So she goes on further to say, at its worst, politeness makes difference and disagreement worse by fostering feelings of selfishness, pride, and superiority over others. Politeness can be and has been weaponized to penalize difference, oppress vulnerable populations and voices, and silence dissonance. Civility requires rediscovering a general regard for our fellow persons and citizens. It demands that we review the basic respect we all are owed and that we owe to one another in light of our shared moral status as members of the human community. And I just love like this book is fabulous. I love the way that she's able to break down these concepts and make them really accessible. It was a super fun read. Again, your definition of fun, my definition of fun might be different, but I really loved it. And then she gets into how we can do this. There's a lot of information about history and cultural context and why and ways people have done it in the past and all those things. But then she goes into how to restore it in our democracy. And she's got lists. And oh my goodness, y'all know I love a good list. And she's got some fabulous lists in here. And I love how she talks about these different concepts. There's one that she calls uncoupling unbundling. That's what it is. Unbundling people. And it's in another one of her lists. It's how to promote tolerance and diminish partisanship. And she's like, unbundling people. Resist the temptation to define people by one aspect of who they are or by their worst trait or decision. Unbundling people can help us reclaim a full, nuanced, and rich view of a human person. It can help us see the part in light of the whole, mistakes in light of virtues, Gilgamesh in light of Enkidu. And that's a example from previously. She talks about Gilgamesh and what type of a ruler he was um, before he met Enkidu. Each of us is a little bit good and a little bit bad. Let's recognize and embrace this aspect of our humanity and not view the world and others through a cheapened statistic simplicity. Basically, let's not reduce everyone down to one aspect of who they are. We are nuanced. We are nuanced individuals. We are complex. And you know what? I have strengths and I have weaknesses, and you'll have strengths and you'll have weaknesses. And we need to try to see people as a whole and not just as what political party they're affiliated to or what their views on religion or economics or whatever. What their favorite social media is. We need to see them as human beings, and we all make mistakes. Compassion is huge and it's vital if we are going to work together in this crazy world that we call life. So, in it, she talks about other concepts that I really loved. She goes into unbundling a little bit further, and she says that it means choosing to be part of a person in light of the whole. So basically, we're not going to agree with everyone on everything. But just because I don't agree with you on something doesn't mean that I can't love and respect you and care about you. I may disagree with something and about that you have chosen to do that you believe or feel strongly about, and you may disagree with me on something, but we can agree to disagree and we can still get along and still care about each other and still work together and be friends. I have quite a few friends who we have different tastes in like media. We have different likes and dislikes when it comes to books or food. Or I was out on a girls' night hangout with some friends, and we started talking about Jane Austen. And oh my gosh, do I have opinions about Jane Austen? I love Jane Austen. I have read every Jane Austen book. I've seen almost every Jane Austen adaptation. And someone brought up one, and before I thought about the way I was speaking, I just kind of blurted out, I'm like, "Oh, that one's terrible. I hate it." And one of my other friends was like, "Oh, I'm sorry you feel that way." And I'm like, "Oh, do you like it?" And she's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "That's okay. You're allowed to like it. I just don't." And she's like, "Well, why don't you like it?" And then we had a really fabulous conversation. At the end of the day, she still loved it and I still hated it, and we moved on. It didn't matter. And there is just so much like that. We can try to express ourselves with civility and kindness. When we disagree about politics, we can do it with kindness. I absolutely love there is a family member of mine who is on my husband's side. And we have the same standards and goals and a lot of the same perspectives, and yet we end up different places when it comes time to vote. But I can talk to them about it safely because I know they're not going to belittle me or ridicule me or think less of me because I've come to a different conclusion than they have. In fact, many times we've sat down and discussed things, and I've learned from their perspectives things that I wasn't aware of, and I've been able to share things from my perspective that they weren't aware of. And we walk away from the conversation better informed. Maybe we change our opinions, maybe we don't, but we're better informed in the process. And that is fabulous. We're not always going to change everyone's opinions, and that's okay. We still need to be kind. So, in it, she talks about also basically with all of these principles, we kind of need to reassess everything. There is And I made a whole list of how I was gonna do this podcast, and I'm just going completely differently, but that's okay. Basically, one of the core things she gets to is something I've discussed before. So often, we want to change the world, but is that in our sphere of influence? Is that really something we can realistically do today? Maybe, maybe not. Depends. Okay, well, then we're like, we want to change our country. We want everyone to do things the way we feel would be best for our country. Is that realistic? Probably not. Okay, well, let's change our community. That's getting more realistic. Let's change our family. Getting closer. Let's change ourselves. And that's really where it comes down to. And so she talks about there's some practices for self care and leisure that will help us reground, get reconnected, ground ourselves, find the balance we need to be more civil ourselves. Because very frequently, if we encounter someone who's being uncivil or we ourselves are being uncivil, it's usually because we are stressed, overwhelmed, frustrated, or, things are chaotic. And so if we can take that time to ground our lives, there is ways we can do self-care that will actually be a proactive way to increase our civility. And that really got me thinking about it because very often I'll tell my husband I need a break because I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed. And then I go and lay down in our bed and scroll social media. Is that going to help me de-stress? Probably not. In fact, it very frequently leads to me feeling more stressed. So, if we're going to take those leisure moments, if we're going to take that self care, let's make this productive. And she comes up with some fabulous things that I want to share with you. From time to time, let's reflect on what we're grateful for. And miracles. What have we seen in our life that we're grateful for? Being kind to ourselves, giving ourselves grace, recognizing, you know what, I had a bad moment. I didn't handle that the way I wanted to. Let's calm down. Let's stop. Let's think of how else I could have handled that. How can I deal with that differently in the future? What can I do to maybe improve that situation retroactively. But also just forgiving ourselves, cultivating gratitude, like I said, like being grateful for the gifts we have. Um, it's amazing when I stop to say thank you to my children for all the things they do. Then I realize, okay, they actually do a lot of the things I ask them to do. Sometimes I get so caught up in the one thing I've asked them to do that they haven't done, and I've had to ask them 20 times, that I forget there's 30 things they have done. And instead of focusing on just that one thing that they are struggling to accomplish, maybe you're reminding them, I'm so grateful you did your dishes. I'm so grateful you made your bed. I'm so grateful you helped your little sister put her shoes on. And helping them recognize that I see the good they're doing. But also taking a moment, I don't know if you have a gratitude journal. That's something I know some people do. Writing down those things you're grateful for. So when those hard times come, you can refer back to all of these things that do go well in our lives. Because oftentimes when we're struggling and are feeling overwhelmed, um, we forget. We forget the good that it does exist in the world. The other one is taking a digital fast, like just taking a break from technology. Oh my word, this is fabulous. I am working on doing this more and more. I'm really trying to do this specifically on Sundays. I think it's a great way to reset my week. Um, but taking a break from social media, taking a break from technology, playing a board game with my kids instead of playing the Switch, going for a walk. Oh my goodness, going for a walk is fabulous for this. Like there are so many things we can do that don't require technology. I had a friend that their family would do a power out um night or day where they would do power free. And so much so is they would actually have like a candlelit dinner as a family. Like they would just no TV, no computer, no internet, no phones. Yes, we can live without our phones. In fact, we can shut them off and the world will not end. And so maybe just unplug for an hour, 2 hours, half a day. Maybe you can go an entire day unplugged. That would be awesome. And it really does help. Just reset. We are a 24/7 society. You can buy almost anything you want. You can find almost any entertainment you want. You can purchase almost any food you want 24/7 without even leaving your home half the time. How about instead we go touch grass? We talk to our neighbor. We get outside. We play catch with our kid. I've got boys who play baseball, so that's a thing for me. I keep telling myself I'm going to do it. I'm really really bad. I'm really bad at throwing a baseball. And finally another baseball mom told me, she's like, "Get over it and just start doing it. You'll get better." And I'm like, "Ah, you're right. I need to do that." But I can do that. And then the last one is incorporate an encounter with the sublime in your daily routine. So just to me that's prayer, but just a daily dose of wonder, recognizing the beauty of this earth, the beauty around us. Whatever, if meditate, if that's your thing. For me, it's prayer and studying my scriptures, or reading really great talks or discourses by people I respect and admire who are religious leaders. So there's lots of different ways. But as we try to and I honestly, there's so much in this book I would want to share with you. Like there's so much in this book I want to share with you, but I'm out of time. I loved this book. Again, I love my lists. I feel like she does a really great job at explaining the difference between politeness and civility, and understanding that is huge. And I'm just going to wrap it up with an example that she gave in here. She has a whole little diagram when she's trying to explain, and I'm going to flip through. Sorry for the sounds. I'm going to flip through to her little diagram about politeness, and she gives different scenarios, and then she explains what's the difference between politeness and civility. And she says, okay, for example, your boss gets a new haircut and it looks terrible. Politeness would often be like, "Oh, that looks so good. Where did you get it done?" Things like that. Flattering, make them feel good about it, even though it looks horrible. But civility, on the other hand, would just be like, you know what? Maybe not mention anything, stay silent, let it go. Find out how they feel about it. Do you like your haircut? Are you trying something new? Ask questions. You don't have to flatter them. You don't have to tell them it looks fabulous. And you know what? Maybe they like that haircut and you can agree to disagree and you can keep your opinion that it looks crappy to yourself. But you don't have to lie and say you think it looks good. You can just say, "Oh, that's a new haircut." But that shows you just a brief example of the difference between politeness and civility. Oftentimes, politeness is we're trying to get something out of someone. We're trying to look good. Sometimes the best thing we can do is keep our mouth shut. The other thing I was talking to my husband about, it's like, okay, if I'm out with friends and I notice one of my friends, her tag is sticking up in the back of her shirt, I could say nothing. It really doesn't affect anything. But I could also just walk in and tuck in her tag for her because I'm her friend and I've got that and I can have her back. It's just a simple thing. Long story short, there is a lot going on in our country. There is a lot going on in this world. There is a lot of hot takes out there. And I know I've had my share of hot takes on this show, but I hope you can see that I am trying to do them with civility. I am trying to show where I'm coming from without degrading those that I disagree with. There's one last thing, and I'm going to include it in the description for this episode, but she has put together a Facebook group that is really great about building community and finding ways to discuss these things and be civil and support each other. And I want to share that resource with you guys. So I will be putting that in the description. Like I said, because of the crazy times in which we live, I'm sure you can guess a few of the things I'm referring to when I say that. I did reorganize the order of podcast episodes, and so the episode I was initially planning for this week did not happen. Additionally, I ended up deciding to take an extra day or so with family, so this episode is coming out slightly later than normal. But you know what? It's all going to be okay. We're going to just breathe through this, and we are going to get through the craziness. And sometimes we just need to take time for ourselves and for our families and reset. So do that if you need to. And like always, as I encourage all of you, let's be the good we want to see in this world. So with that, I am your host, Sam Wolf, and you're listening to Life of a Military Wife.